Let's we'll start in a minute, please. Yeah, take your seats.
How are you? Nice to see you. How are you? Are you confirmed for tomorrow for lunch with us? Perfect.
Say again? Yes, nice to see you. Very good. It's great to see a lively bunch. There's a lot of energy in the room, I would say, so that's great. I wanted to first introduce myself. I'm Charles Cormier. I am the regional practice director for infrastructure for Europe and Central Asia, so covering all of Europe and essentially South Caucasus, West Balkans, Ukraine, and Central Asia. We wanted to talk today about railway as a development engine, and I was looking at the numbers today. It's quite interesting. We at the World Bank are managing about 15 projects in railways, amounting to about 4.5 billion. So, such a substantive program. However, in the last year, we've actually grown our portfolio quite a lot. So we see a lot of uptake and a lot of interest to invest in railways, and there's different reasons for that. And I'm looking forward to the panel to teach us a little more. But you may have seen, for instance, a big large-scale corridor expansion in India. We've done improved access and safety and service quality in Egypt. We have a strengthened regional connectivity project in Uzbekistan, advanced railway governance and digitalization in Serbia. We've promoted greener freight systems through policy reform and pilot programs in China. And in my own region, we have in Kazakhstan done an interesting guarantee platform in the railway sector with the utility, with IFC and MIGA doing other investments as well to essentially buy rolling stock and improve the financial viability of that utility. And you'll see very soon, we just distributed our package to the board for a big investment in rail connectivity for Turkey, which is, of course, at the forefront of several corridors. So, and all in all, we have about technical assistance to about 20 different countries. So a very interesting and growing portfolio in railways. In the region of Europe and Central Asia that I work on, we're seeing, as I said, lots of interest, and particular some countries, of course, that are soon to be accession country. Their accession is soon to accede to the EU, are trying to connect to the EU corridors, and we see a lot of activity around the Trans-Caspian Trade Corridor. So lots and lots of activity. So with that, what I wanted to hear today, and what we're trying to do in this session is to see what brings all of these. Let's say this combination of investments together. Why is it that railways is becoming more important? What works in terms of financing and structuring of projects? How to mobilize private capital? How to strengthen railway SOEs? How to deliver safer and more efficient rail systems? And eventually how to use railways to grow the economy and create better jobs, which is a theme, of course, of transforming transport. So without further ado, let me turn to the panel. I'll start with. So I won't introduce each panelist right away. I'll just introduce them when I ask them to speak. So I think that let's start with Lucy Anderton. Sorry, should do my notes here. So Lucy Anderton is the Director of Sustainability at the International Union of Railways at UIC. She has more than 20 years of experience in sustainability policy and environmental management, gained at the Network Rail at the UK's rail infrastructure as the UK rail infrastructure manager. So lots and lots of experience. So Lucy, maybe you want to start us off. And my question is, with many governments facing tight fiscal space, why should railway investments remain a priority? And what makes rail uniquely positioned to deliver economic, climate, and social returns compared to other transport modes? So you can just kick us off. Thank you.
Yeah. So you mean like why trains? Why trains, right? And I think, and it doesn't really matter if it's good times or bad times when it comes to public funding. When you're spending public funding, you should do it responsibly. You should make sure that when you're spending public finance in that way, that you've got to be proving that you're delivering value. And that it's value that is bringing benefit to the whole economy, to the whole society, right? So I think that's why rail is uniquely positioned to be able to deliver that kind of really broad value, because it can deliver on the economic, the climate goals, and the social returns as well as. So, for example, on the economic, it can really deliver capacity, it can really deliver productivity, because it's one of those modes that really can deliver large volumes of people, of freight, and even in quite constrained corridors, right? So it can move a lot, and so that then translates to the wider economy. You reduce congestion, your reliability of supply chains, and of course that kind of connectivity to labour markets, into ports, into industrial hubs. And so in practice, sort of rail investment is not just sort of transport spending, it's really investing in productivity, competitiveness, that kind of, in your country, So that's why it's sort of, it's this, what did we say, engine? It's a development engine indeed. And I love the sort of engine pun, by the way. But also there's a real climate piece as well, right? It's innately energy efficient. That steel on steel means that it's always going to be a really energy efficient way of moving goods and people, and it's really readily electrified as well already, right? It's been the longest electrified mode of transport, the most electrified form of transport all over the world. So we know it's really ready for that, and you can integrate your renewables really, really readily as well. So it's, in terms of climate, it's perfectly well aligned as well. So any investment going into rail is climate finance, I think we can say. But there's definitely a social element as well, right? So it really boosts, it's really safe, it's inclusive as a mass form of transport, and it brings that regional cohesion as well, and international cohesion, that can really sort of bring sort of social equality factors in as well. It's fantastic at reducing road deaths, congestion and air quality issues, so those kind of social gains as well. So that public health equity outcomes that I think we should be talking about more when we're talking about the investment to rail, and really should be recognizing the kind of social benefits it brings. Plus, of course, the jobs, which goes to say, there's loads of great operational jobs, as well as in construction jobs, but that's multiplying as well when it comes to giving people access to work as well, and access to education and to labour markets as well. So there are examples of that. So the Spanish really invested in rail high speed in the 90s and early 2000s, and they've really seen a real boost in GDP. So, for example, the Madrid to Seville connected Andalusia, one of the poorer parts of Spain at the time, and they saw a 1.5 annual GDP growth for Andalusia, and that's just through that connectivity, that investment of that's sort of bringing that wealth to other parts of the country. So it's really proving to work.
Very good. So, Ms. Anderton, thank you for that. So, rail is an engine of growth, and I love the Spanish example on GDP. I'm connecting to my colleague here who should document that. Let me pass to my colleague Pierre Pozzo di Borgo, who is the Chief Industry Specialist at the IFC. He has a lot of experience, of course, 32 years there, and is now working on transport activities globally, but has a special focus on sub-Saharan Africa, I guess. So, Pierre, rail projects are often seen as complex and risky. Where do you see the biggest risk? Demand, regulatory, construction, or political? And how would you attribute the risk between public and private partners?
No, thank you for having me over. I guess that's the billion-dollar question. And since I have only 5 minutes, I'm going to try to be as quick as I can. First of all, the notion of risk. If you cannot price risk, it's difficult to evaluate risk. So when we talk about railway risk, investment risk, the ability to price that risk and understand how it's being generated, by whom, and how long it can last is key to understanding risk allocation between public and private at the end of the day. So when we look at private sector, they look at risk in terms of purely financial return, and they look at risk as, initial equity contribution or debt raising, rather than when you look at the public, they look at risk in a complete different ways, including they look at economic return and then look at financial ones. The problem with railways, there's not a single type of railway, we have all kinds. We have vertically integrated railways that do both rail train operation and infrastructure management. We have unbundled ones. We have railways that are purely mining railways, where they're center of cost, not of revenue or profit, that are being treated in terms of risk perception, purely in terms of the logistics chain being reliable and delivering the goods. And then we have everything else in between. But I would say, when we look at public versus private allocation, the first thing that is obvious is trying to amortize on the private side infrastructure with loan that can rarely exceed 20 years, and infrastructure that is supposed to be amortized over 50 years or more, create already a disincentive for private sector to take a risk, because there is a misalignment, obviously, between the amortization you can do of that infrastructure and the time you can raise money against it. So I would say naturally infrastructure, or what we call below rail infrastructure, tends to rest with public usually. And when you do above rail infrastructure, such as rail slippers and ballast and traffic control system, in order to transfer that risk to the private sector, you need to have a certain size of market demand that is either already established or is confirmed by long-term offtake agreement by either shippers or miners, in order to be able to spread that risk over many years. And of course, you had one other issues there that we see in developing countries, mainly IDA countries, is the mismatch between long-term financing in hard currency and local currency revenue, where there had become purely an FX risk issue. So there are many layers of risk. I would say that if I had to put my hat of private sector, the biggest risk that we see in any of the railway projects that we do is PSOs, public service obligation, because passenger is great for, many reasons, some that have already been alluded to in terms of connectivity, but in terms of political risk, in terms of revenue risk, they're first and foremost in the head of any private investor. So unless they're specialized in doing passenger trains and everything else taken care by the public, and the off-taker that pays the PSO is a very reliable off-taker who has the means to afford what he or she wants, this is something that usually I always tell my clients, to the extent that we can separate that and just focus on cargo, it would help a lot de-risk the project. Everything else then based on demand, intermodal competition and unfairness of intermodal competition comes to mind, especially in developing country where we have very weak standards of intermodal competition and weak enforcement. Think about truck axle loads, truck regulation or lack thereof, informal employees versus formal one on the sector that has to pay everything. And I can go on and on and on. So in a nutshell, I would say that infra usually is better suited for public. Everything else that is measurable in terms of risk and that has a clear cash flow, projection attached to it and cash flow capacity can be rested with the private sector, as long as minimal revenue threshold are being achieved and minimal expectation can be met in terms of rate of return on equity.
Thank you, Pierre. That's a very concise lifetime in 5 minutes. Thank you. Let me dig deeper into the financing of railway structure and infrastructure. Let me then introduce Edgar Benozati, who's a Brazilian executive serving as director president of the Companhia Paulista de Parcerias, which is a public agency responsible for structuring and managing public-private partnerships and concessions for the state of Sao Paulo. Welcome. I think you've done a major PPPs across both infrastructure and social sectors in Brazil. If you just building on what Pierre is saying, Sao Paulo has developed one of the most active PPP programs in emerging markets. What are the institutional elements that have been most critical in building the investor confidence and maintaining a credible project pipeline in the rail sector?
Thank you, Charles. Thanks for having me. Well, I'm going to contradict a little bit Pierre here, because São Paulo, the state of São Paulo in Brazil, the state is responsible for the passengers and the federal government is responsible for all the cargo. So when we're talking about our PPPs, our rail pipeline projects, we're only talking about urban mobility and passengers, and we've been able to actually transfer those projects to the private sector, obviously trying to mitigate those risks that Pierre mentioned. They make a lot of our day-to-day basis trying to figure out how to mitigate those risks, but we were actually successful and we've been successful in that sense. I would say that our success story, and I believe the state of São Paulo is actually a success story in the PPPs, especially in the rail sector, is for the economists is a bit of a ultra-aggressive model. in the sense that we are successful now because we were successful in the past. The program has over almost 30 years. It started in 1998, and it's been all the time. And we had payments going for a couple, well, maybe $7 billion in that period, and payments for all the private sector companies that are our partners. And we never had any events of not paying, of the government actually having any problem with paying. So that gives confidence for the private sector to actually, when we announce a project, they are able to to know that they're going to be able to put money on that project, to study all the complexity and the time that's going to take to understand this project, and they're able to study it, and they know that it's going to be something that the state is going to take care of it. This program, it goes through all the areas. We have rails, we have hospitals, we have social, but I would say that each year that passes, that we have a more solidified program, we have more contracts, it grows in the importance, both for the industry of Brazil, but also for the GDP of the state of São Paulo. Infrastructure is quite relevant for us. It gets harder and harder to actually bring problems to the program. No government is going to try to mess with it. It's going to try to, well, maybe not pay a contract or not respect some of the rules, because it's such a consolidated program. It's such a consolidated asset of the state of São Paulo that's going to be harder. And that's why I believe that in this case, the past of the program is actually a mirror of the future that you're going to have it. And I would point out from the institutional point of view, two principal aspects that actually give us all that structure for this program, especially talking about railways. I would say the first of it, legitimacy in the public size. So this program started in 1998 with roads, and we started with toll roads. No one likes to pay for the toll roads, but the politicians in the state decided to go forward with it. And after 1 or 2 years that we had a bad reception for the public, the roads started getting a lot better, and then people started to like it. And going forward a couple of years, the state of São Paulo now has 9 of the 10 best roads in Brazil. So everyone in the state of São Paulo is now not happy, but at least they know that they're getting what they're paying for. And that gives us a lot of positive feedback for the program. And the same goes to the railways. In 2004, we started bidding the line 4 of the Metro of São Paulo, which was signed in 2006. And this is one of the best lines of the city of São Paulo. We have other lines that are operated by the public agency, but the public recognizes that this one has a different standard of operation. This is actually a line that's much more comfortable for a series of reasons, but in the eyes of the public, it gives us legitimacy. And that's really important when we're talking about a public policy that's bringing about private partners to something that's usually public. So that sort of legitimacy allows us to go into the different kind of projects. Now we're doing intercity trains with partners from the IDB and also the World Bank, and give us the possibility to go in these sectors without having to worry about the reception of the public. And that's really important. And the second institutional aspect that I would like to say, it comes, it's a bit, maybe I'm a little bit biased towards it, but it's about government capacity. A bit academic, but government capacity in the sense of when the government decides to achieve a certain goal, it has the ability and the public servants and the capacity to actually implement that goal. And in the state of São Paulo, that's really important, because this sort of program, you have to, you know, you're going to make mistakes, and you need to correct them quickly. And you need to correct them in the program, the contracts that have already been signed, and for the future ones, so that you're building and that you're building better projects all the time. And for us, this is an area that the state of São Paulo has invested quite a lot of time, money, and people. And we also have a lot of great partners. Some of those here today, the World Bank, IFC, IDB, and all their other project partners in Brazil as well, local partners. So that sort of building that knowledge allow us to build better projects that allows to continue in that circle of legitimacy, because we make better projects, the life of people get better, and they see that, well, actually, even though there are people that are always going to associate bringing a private partner to this type of project with privatizations, increase of fares, or something like that, but in the sense of general happiness with this sort of project, I believe those two aspects are the main ones that allow us to keep going and allow us to have a pipeline of railways that we have right now, which is quite a big one.
Very good, very good. So lots of huge track record. I'll I hope we'll get to the question period soon. Let me then introduce Stefan Volkanovski, who is actually the State Secretary at the Ministry of Transport of the Republic of North Macedonia. Very interesting country with lots of connectivity investments and agenda. He assumed this position in October 2024, but he's also has experience in the private sector way back, but worked for a very long time as state advisor for coordination of the Commission for Economic System and current economic policy. So wealth of experience. I wanted to ask you, North Macedonia sits at the crossroads of key regional corridors. So how does rail factor into your strategy for strengthening regional connectivity and economic integration? What are the opportunities for rail, both for freight and passenger services?
Thank you. It's an honor to be here today. As you mentioned, North Macedonia sits at the crossroad of key regional corridors. Macedonia's geographic position at the intersection of major regional transport corridors makes rail a key component of a strategy to strengthen regional connectivity, economic integration. Rail can serve as a backbone for efficient movement of both goods and people across the Western Balkan and our European markets. For a small country as Macedonia, the biggest challenge is to secure financing and loans and grants for this kind of projects. Government of the Republic of Macedonia is strongly committed to upgrading our national infrastructure. It's very important, I can say crucial for our economy. Building and modernizing the railway system is a key part of our strategy to improve regional connectivity and support economic growth. I can tell some words about Corridor 8 and about Corridor 10, whose crossing in the Republic of Macedonia. Regarding the Corridor 8, I would like to underline that it's a strategic and security corridor for NATO alliance. Officially, it's recognized as a part of alliance strategic infrastructure. Macedonia's geographic position at the intersection of major regional transport corridors that makes rail a key component of the strategy. The Corridor 8 connects the Adriatic and Black Sea, linking Italy, Albania, Macedonia, and Bulgaria. It is more than a transport corridor. It's a bridge for trade, cooperation, and integration with the wider European market. The eastern side of the corridor in Macedonia is divided into 3 sections. Now we are working, the first section is finished. For the second section, we are hard working. And for the third section, it's border with Bulgaria. Now we are tendering the third section, and it will be published this month. Financial structure for that section, particularly secured loans from EIB, Lead Bank, and EBRD, each in the amount of 175 million euros. Investment grant and technical assistance grant from WBIF in the amount of 150 million. About the Corridor 10, regarding the railway on Corridor 10, we are planning the largest regional project, which is a high-speed railway. The idea is for Macedonia to build a high-speed railway from the border with Serbia to the border from Greece. It's around 200 kilometers in order to enable fast transport of goods and passengers from Greece to Macedonia, Serbia, here Austria to Hungary. Corridor 10 begins in Salzburg, Austria, and runs through Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Macedonia, and Greece, ending at the port of Thessaloniki. The corridor includes both road and railway infrastructure and is considered strategically important for regional connectivity and integration with European transport networks. The high-speed railway along Corridor 10, intended for cargo transport, is being designed for speed of 120 kilometers per hour, and it's expected to be operational within 5 years after the start of construction. That is fully functional by 2031, 2032. This project we are doing with United Kingdom with G2G partnership we signed in 2025. The agreement with the government of United Kingdom and Northern Ireland supports the project with a financing framework of nearly 2 billion euros. Corridor 10 plays a crucial role in strengthening regional cooperation, increasing trade and transit flows, improving mobility of people and goods, supporting economic growth and foreign investments. The continued development and modernization of Corridor 10 remains a strategic priority for the country, contributing to stronger integration into European transport and economic system.
Thank you. So now I can see, I mean, a small country, but with a very big agenda. And I was hearing today that that construction and transport is driving economic growth. So great to see that. Let me turn then to our last speaker, Srimuna Kumar, who has a long, distinguished career in railways. I think has worked in railways for 26 years, and he's currently the director with the National Capital Region Transport Corporation, which is a joint venture, of course, in India of the states of Delhi, Haryana, Rajasthan, and Uttar Pradesh. And I'm hearing from my colleague that you've made a huge significant transformation in your sector. So I wanted to hear from you about, rapid transit system in India is one of the most ambitious commuter rail programs globally. So what has been the critical factors to deliver such a large-scale multi-state project on schedule and to high technical standards?
Thank you, and thank you for giving me opportunity to talk about the RRTS system of India, particularly Delhi. I'll try to take 1 minute for explaining about what the project it is. This is a commuter rail corridor of 82 kilometers, which is the first corridor which we have commissioned recently. It's not a commuter service on the existing corridor. It's a dedicated commuter corridor, which is fully grade separated, either elevated or underground. There are 14 stations on the entire corridor, and the stations are spaced around 5 to 6 kilometers apart. So it is not only connecting Delhi to Meerut, which is the other end. It is connecting, in fact, capturing the traffic all through the population hubs along the corridor. The journey time is less than an hour for 82 kilometers with all the stops. The train is designed to run at 180 kmph, and the operational speed is 160. What it has brought is total transformation in that area. And in fact, the ridership, the end-to-end corridor commissioning was done on 22nd of Feb. We are in third week of the operation. And the ridership is around 100,000 every day. So the response has been tremendous. 100,000 to start with, and it's growing. I mean, we expect it to grow rather exponentially. Now, coming back, how the project was done, and rightly you said that it is one of the most ambitious commuter rail project. The simple reason is, rather I'll say there are 5 points which makes the project commissioning to the time and within the cost. These are the two key factors normally we don't find in the public projects. The first one, I'll say it is the vision. The vision is perhaps at the top leadership level, and everybody is aligned to that, that maybe it's a very, very ambitious, but then India has to become a developed country by 2047. And this small project is part of that larger vision. This is success story is the part of that. The second, I'll tell you the key factor for success is the institutional arrangement which has been done for this regional project. Normally, when the various stakeholders are there, India being a federal country, we have various state government and the central government is there. And the regional connectivity, it goes out of Delhi and it goes to various states. So it's a very difficult balancing task. But then the NCRTC has come into picture where the state government and central government, they are the partners. And that's how each and every stakeholder has been roped into so that the project delivery is easy. It's not only a structural part, its financing also has the similar structure where the state government is financing, the central government is financing, and we have multilateral agencies, of course. The third success reason I'll mention is a lot of planning was done. Perhaps it was not rushed through project. Before the project was started, almost it took 2 years to remove all the hurdles which normally come for the project execution, like all utility shifting, land acquisition, permissions, to deal with various state governments. So these are the normal hurdles in public project. It was in a focused way for the first 2 years, these problems were solved. The next one, I'll say the use of technology. The technology which was used was perhaps the best, what is available. We used continuous CORS kind of this GPS-based system for deciding our alignments. The reference stations were so accurate that we need not go back and do the recheck or do some correction kind of thing. We had most of the system built with the precast concrete. Even the track, we had a precast slab, so that gave the speed. We also picked up very good system of signaling. Rather, I'll say we were pioneers in some of the things. The ETCS level 2 on LTE, normally it is on GSMR in most of the Europe. So we were the first to implement. We are also going to make ATO, what is called automatic train operation, on ETCS system, the first time perhaps. So these were the factors as far as technology is concerned. We brought by and large everything which was latest. And last but not the least was the financing. The financing part, of course, the equity partners, the state government, the central government, they were always prompt in releasing the funds. And so was with our multilateral agencies, ADB, AIB, and NDB, who were our financing partners. Around 60% of fund has come through these agencies. So they were equally prompt, and perhaps we had very good relationships with them. I think this sums up what makes the project successful. Everybody has contributed, and that's how it becomes. Thank you.
Great, congratulations on that. Very impressive. Having lived in India for several years, I think that's pretty impressive result. I wanted to open up the floor to see if there was any burning questions of the distinguished panelists. If yes, go ahead, sir. If you want to also introduce yourself and let us know if there's a specific person you're channeling the question to.
Thank you. My name is Naved Qureshi. I'm a retired staff from the IFC and the World Bank in global transport. So I have particular questions for Edgard and Srimana. So I share Pierre's view on risks. And then when you hear Sao Paulo's example, which is very interesting, I'm just wondering, you're using the sort of general revenue probably of the state to shield some of these risks to private investors. So I was wondering, for the rail investments particularly, that you were mentioning, Line 4 and others, what is the level of cost recovery or funding coming from the fare box versus other sources? And I'd have a similar question for I know you're very early days, but what are your projections, both in terms of ridership? You're starting at 100,000, which is great, 1 month into operations, but what are you projecting stable ridership at, and what level of subsidy are you requiring on the operational side? Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Go ahead, Edgar, please.
Yeah. That's actually quite an interesting question. We changed a lot how we allocate the risk regarding demand on our projects. When it comes to financing the projects, I would say that roughly it varies a bit. We have different kind of projects when you're talking about subways and we're talking about intercity trains, but all in all, and if we're talking about greenfield operations or brownfield, but all in all, I would say that's roughly 20% of the income of the project comes from tariffs, and the other 80% will come from payments from the state at some point, either lump sum payments when it's a greenfield and we're going to pay it as the private partner will build the project, or availability payments along the life of the project, the 30 years. But the interesting thing, and that percentage may change a little bit, my colleagues here probably know that number better than me, but the thing that I find it interesting is that the risk regarding the tariffs that changed quite a lot since we started in 2004 and how we do it now, because we started allocating the risk entirely to the private partner. The same way we did it with roads, because, well, that's what we did in 98, it should work in 2006, and that's what we did. And what we saw in practice is that even though the risk was allocated to the private partner, in the end, the backstop is always the state, because there are other risks. So you have, well, COVID. When COVID happens, who's going to pay for the bill? It's going to be the state. And we changed that quite a lot. And I would say that our risk allocation now is much more sophisticated, and we're evolving to what I believe is a new standard, which is the availability payment. So, well, that risk is not for the private partner because he can't control how many people are going to use the subway, how many people are going to choose to use Uber or taxi or whatever. I just need to pay for him to make sure the infrastructure is there and it's working from my standards point of view. Obviously, we need to worry a bit about incentives, and we want him to have a little bit of risk so that he's also interested in trying to keep up, especially when I have competing types of transportation. But in general, that's what we're working nowadays.
Can I have a quick follow-up? You mentioned earlier that success begets success, that since you were always paying the debt service and performing projects, then the private sector always comes. Do you see a reduction in the state support over time, or do you see this level pretty much stable? Has it changed over time?
I'm not really sure if it reduced. I don't think it reduced. I think what reduced over time is the risk assessment that our private partners have, especially the banks that are financing our private partner have regarding that type of project. And what we're seeing when we started doing this type of projects back in the 2000s, we had one player, maybe two players. And nowadays we're still trying to bring, because these projects are pretty big for Brazilian standards. We're talking about $3 billion projects, which are pretty big, but we're having seen more competition, and then we can lower a little bit of the prices in the end.
Okay, very good. Srimunar, did you want to respond to the question, please?
Sure. Coming back to of course, finances. The good part is that the ridership, what we are getting today, is more than what we had thought of. So that's the positive. Of course, we will not be able to break even with this ridership, and to get a break even, we for this corridor we require 176,000, and we hope that we'll get by year end. So that's nearby. Now, there is a modeling which is done for fare box and non-fare box. Normally, that's the obvious thing to be done. But then non-fare box, it has its own gestation period. And many a times to hurry for that kind of TOD development in the early stage of project may not be advisable because it may not give the kind of financial return it is supposed to give. But let the ridership come, let the value come, and then if we go for TOD, that's what my perception, we'll be able to perhaps mitigate all the financial risk in a much better way rather than jumping at this stage. So the strategy is to support the transport system for the time being, and then TOD, advertising, and all those things to be put together, that is going to give us around 30% of the total, what the revenue we are going to get. And with that, we hope that it will be sustainable.
So just to be clear, 70% is going to come
From fare
medium
box.
term from the fare.
Fare box,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, that's quite a different range. Any other burning question to the panelists? I see, okay, there's a gentleman in the back. Go ahead, yep. Yeah, and then we'll come back to the front after, yeah.
Satish Kusuri, I'm a professor at Purdue University. I have a question to all the panelists, but particularly to Professor Sri Munnar. As a user of many of these rail systems in India, one of the challenges I find is the first and last mile connectivity. How do you access these train stops in a safe manner and connect it to all the other modes of transportation, right? We also did a lot of analysis in Delhi and Chennai, and we see that the first and last mile connectivity is a big burden for many users. And the implication of that is it excludes certain types of users from using these types of systems, right? Especially if they don't feel safe, if they cannot access these types of systems in general. So my question is, first, have you considered that as part of your planning process? And what type of solutions did you take into consideration when actually building the system? Thank you.
Thank you, and bringing the user's perspective to this panel discussion. But as the pain point, what you have suggested is what makes the commuter not to come to any this kind of system. Fortunately, we have taken care of that at the planning stage. And two things, what you have asked, one, normally what we call first and last mile connectivity. The second is multimodal integration. Rather, I'll take the second part first. The multimodal integration has been the key to our alignment fixing. Rather, I'll tell you the first station, which is Sarai Kale Khan, which is, if you are familiar with Delhi, it's right near to Hazrat Nizamuddin railway station. We have connected Hazrat Nizamuddin railway station with our RRTS station with a skywalk, which is 250 meters long. We have provided travelators with full lighting cover and all those things. So it's very, very, it's taking into account that. The Sarai Kale Khan station, we have purposely built near the metro station so that it gets connected to metro. In fact, one entrance and other entrance are just in front of each other. The ISBT, Interstate Bus Terminal, is going to be shifted near to that, to our RRTS station. The city bus, which used to stop at some other location, we have brought right under our station. So 5 modes of transport, I can tell you, gets connected in the 200-meter radius. That's the max. You come to next station, Ashok Nagar, we have connected it with Delhi Metro. The third is Anand Vihar. The entire alignment was not required to go to Anand Vihar, but we went there because it is one of the major hub of transport, having railway station of national carrier. Then we have 2 ISBTs and 2 metro lines. So we were the 6th one to reach there, and we made it even if it was difficult to reach there. Come to Ghaziabad, we are connecting to, again, the metro system. So the connectivity part, fortunately, we have taken care in this, and that is what has given ridership from day one. So that's giving the fruit today. The second part is first and last mile connectivity. particularly the safety part. I can tell you some of the initiative which we have taken is Pink Auto. This is a concept which we have started. The Pink Auto is a three-wheeler which is driven by women. And that's what we are trying to finance. These pink autos, they'll be there at various stations. They'll be able to carry our girls, women to LAs of that population hub, and they will find it safe to travel. And let me tell you, 35% of our commuters are women. So that brings the safety, that gives the inclusivity to the system. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me come back to the panel a bit. I wanted to hear from Pierre because what you've heard earlier is how much of the financing is going to be covered by user fees and how much by the public sector. I wanted to hear from you about, with your experience on blended finance and guarantees and concessional instruments, how would we de-risk rail projects? So this question is for Pierre, and what's the experience of IFC in this regard?
Okay, so when it comes to passenger, I think what's clear and has been said, success breeds success, and if we're dealing with an off-taker, a public agency or local government that does establish a reputation of paying, obviously that has a positive impact on the interest rate that the IFC would charge its borrower, or it would have an impact on the equity return target that investor would be looking at, because presumably there's more safety in terms of future revenue generation. But that's just for a middle-income country with a track record. If I look at where railway are the most needed in emerging country towards the lower scale in terms of development, what we have found out is usually we try to grab the subsidy at the source. So, for instance, in many cases, rail passenger ticket fare has a VAT portion into it. And so what we do is the operators that operates the public service obligation on behalf of the government retains that VAT at the source. And at the end of the year, if the subsidy is paid or only paid partially, or there are delays, they can keep it. It's one way to alleviate, with the objective, of course, that whatever we do, we try to make sure that the fare that is being charged is close to that 80% that is outside of the VAT, so that even if there is a non-compliance whatsoever by the government, we're not too far away. Now, in the case of Sao Paulo, if we're only at 20%, obviously, that would be a challenge. What we see is most of the things that we do, we're not that far away, because we are not looking at commuter rail. We're more looking into trans-country rail, like longer haul. And there's a premium that can be charged and needs to be explained to government in terms of, if you take the bus fare as a comparator, yes, the bus fare as a comparator, but as it was explained to us, the danger of being an accident in the train is 1/1000 of the bus. You can also carry in the train, and that's things that our client do to buttress demand. You will have a wagons that will have all the cargo goods that comes with you. So one person will come with the equivalent of his or her weight of cargoes. And so you buttress revenue on that basis as well. But the short of it all is, what worries me and worries us the most as financier at the end of the day is, can the government afford the ambition that he or she is putting forward? And that means that we turn to be more IMF-style people, looking at macroeconomics, looking at how the budget can be ring-fenced for that subsidy away from the general budget, because we know the general budget is basically a punching bag that adjusts upwards and downwards. And usually when you are public service obligation, you don't have the option of stopping it. You have to continue no matter what. And so that's, to us, is the gravest risk, is, can they afford it? Is it reasonable in terms of ask? And if it's reasonable in terms of ask, can we ring fence it somewhat, either through direct fare, basically collecting at the source that VAT, or other means, so that we don't have to hope that we'll be number 18 knocking at the door asking for what is owed this year after, another 17 other government clients who are asking for the money. So there's no silver lining or magic bullet about that. Our assessment of risk is more of affordability at the public level. Does it go way beyond what they can afford? And if that's the case, I mean, is it even reasonable to entertain, responding positively to a demand of risk transfer from the public to the private sector? And usually the IFC, we will play the devil's advocate because our client usually is between a rock and a hard place when they're already doing PSOs and a new minister comes and say, we have election coming, I want you to double the number of trains, run them faster, Well, there are consequences. And the problem that we have mostly is Minister of Transport ordinate, but Minister of Finance pays. And so what we do, which is systematic, is I love to talk to you, but I want the Ministry of Finance representative in the room at the same time so that we understand each other very clearly as to the consequences of what is being asked.
Very good. So you brought the issue of the macroeconomic impact of large investments and whether the country can afford it. Actually, I'll turn to North Macedonia. I mentioned earlier, North Macedonia has a huge ambition on connectivity, but managing its fiscal issues quite well. So is the solution that you're focusing on reforms, and telling us a little bit about how you see let's say the role of reforms in your decision to be ambitious and to do more programs in transport, in railway in particular?
Thank you. As you mentioned, infrastructure investments alone is not sufficient to achieve a modern, efficient, and competitive railway system. We must make reforms in the system also. Modernizing railway companies is necessary to improve service quality and competitiveness. This includes upgrading management practices in introducing modern technologies and digital systems and improving operational planning. Reforms are crucial for financial sustainability. Historically, many railway companies in the region have faced financial challenges due to inefficiency, outdated business models, and insufficient cost recovery. In line with the above, the government of Macedonia adopted action plans for restructuring for both Macedonian rail companies. We have public enterprise for railway infrastructure and transport company. Government adopted action plans for restructuring for both of them, which defines specific steps and deadlines for the implementation. It's for the period 2026-2030. As a country, we are hardworking to position ourselves on the European railway infrastructure map so that we do not remain as a blind spot in the Balkans. What we need as a country are affordable loans and grants so that we can build and modernize the railway infrastructure, as well as procure new trains that meet high environmental standards and contribute to a sustainable and clean environment. Alignment with European standards and integrations into the regional rail network is a key objective. As Macedonia moves closer to European transport system, adopting modern regulatory frameworks, safety standards, and interoperability requirements which facilitate smoother cross-border operation and improve access to European markets.
Very good. So you mentioned affordable concessional financing and grants. So let me turn to Ms. Anderton. We've heard, I mentioned at the beginning that the IFIs, at least the World Bank, is investing more, significantly more in railways, and I think other IFIs are doing the same. But what we're hearing here is that probably not enough financing. How do we mobilize more financing for railways? And is there a role for climate finance, carbon carbon funds, and so on? So just wanted to hear from you about what you see in terms of, the ambition and how do we finance it?
It's really exciting to hear that more and more projects are coming through, but it does take some time to develop these projects, right? And so we really need to accelerate in that space, and we're seeing that. Yeah, there are many countries that need it most, have got those high debt burdens, they're sort of considered higher risk, and so it can be very difficult for them to access affordable finance for this. So we need to think a little bit more creatively around this, because it seems that perhaps the traditional way that we assess cost and benefit in the models are not really thinking about the sort of, as you said, these really long-term investments, right? Sometimes much more than 50 or 100-year-old infrastructure still running. So, and these large societal benefits, these avoided carbon emissions, they're not really always really being accounted for when we're thinking about the value that we're making investment decisions, right? So how do we start to sort of internalize some of these values and monetize some of this value? And we do at UIC, we see some interesting opportunities in the carbon markets and carbon and climate space. We've heard there are more and more railways are accessing more affordable finance through green bonds and sustainability-linked bonds, because they can demonstrate these sort of co-benefits that are bringing from environmental and social gains as well. Carbon markets has not been really tapped into for a little bit for some public transport, some electric bus schemes, some BRTs are looking to tap into carbon markets, but the methodologies can be complicated. The avoided emissions from modal shift can be quite complicated. Proving additionality with a largely public funded infrastructure can be complicated. So there's some work I think we can do as a sort of transport community to really help these projects to access carbon markets. It's not going to pay for it's not going to give you billions, but it might really de-risk. It brings you a diverse form of revenue in that operational phase. So that it proves the sort of these co-benefits that we're talking about, because they're monitoring and reporting on the avoided emissions every year, and that's a really great story we should be telling, I think, for rail. So I think there's some work we can do for the Article 6 through the UNFCCC process, but also in national compliance markets and voluntary markets. And the CORSIA aviation scheme. So we should be looking at all these spaces where we can find new forms of revenue for public transport and rail investment in that. And I think we can work together on this. And Delhi is one of the sort of trailblazers on this. Delhi Metro has been accessing carbon markets. So it would be great to hear from your experiences as well, I think, in sort of how you've been able to access and bring these new revenue from regenerative braking, from modal shift, and so that it's actually free money. It's not loans, it's actually free money that we can bring to really boost investment.
Very good. Did Shrimuna want to respond to that question?
As far as this suggestion, regenerative braking is concerned, it's already there in our system. I'll just add a few of the things when you are talking about green initiatives. 4 of our stations are energy neutral today because of solar plants which we have put on the rooftop. So it's a zero energy from outside for those 4 stations out of 14. We are also going for, because there is an incentive from Government of India for going solar plants and these green initiatives. We have already started the process. The partner we have already finalized for a 110 megawatt of solar plant. It is a greenfield plant which is going to supply energy to us, and as and when we are not ready to take that, it will go to the market. And that is going to give us around 40% of energy requirement of our system. Right now itself, because the solar market is developing quite substantially in India, we are doing energy, only around 70% of energy we are buying at the fixed price. Balance 30% we are going for a trading market. And it's helping because daytime up to 4 o'clock, because of solar generation is there and demand is low, the prices are very less. So that is giving us saving as far as the operating cost is concerned. So few initiatives we have taken, and let's hope to learn more from other people, and then we'll try to implement all those. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. I think there was a question from, yeah, let's ask the question. I'm being told I need to, you want to answer as, okay.
Thank you. My name is Charles Schlumberger, air transport specialist at the bank. Connectivity infrastructure in the world has always been a cost center. Roads, railways, aviation. Aviation has changed. We have many airlines that are profitable now, private, some state-owned. Railway is different. You don't have competition, many issues. But there are few railways that are profitable, that don't cost in the United States, Japan, and there are 2 or 3 in emerging or developing countries. I think Morocco, I read, I think India has some railways. My dumb question, I'm an aviator, but I'm interested in that as a Swiss. We love our railways, cost a lot of money. The question is, what does it take for an emerging or developing country to actually have a railway that doesn't need subsidies? When is it scale? Is it private management? Is it realistic? Or do we have to accept it's just another road or bridge that the government needs to finance? Thank you.
That's a great question for the closing. Let me hold that thought. And there's another question from
Edipo Silva, I'm Senior Transport Specialist in Latin America. No, I just want to come back to the first Q&A session to clarify an information that Edgar mentioned. He is absolutely right when he mentioned that 20% comes from the private sector and 80% from the government. But this is specific for CapEx, for capital expenditure for the implementation of the project. The cost recovery for operations is something around 70 to 80% on fare box revenue and ridership. Of course, it varies a little bit depending on the profile of the line, the number of integration, gratuities, etc., but it's between 70 to 80%.
Great, thank you for that clarification. There's a burning question from over there, so let's ask that.
Thank you. My name is Solomon. Hi, I'm from the Washington, D.C. area, but my question would be my birthplace from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, so I bring that perspective. I'm in the private field with civil engineering and transportation planning. We're talking about a lot of railway and asset development engine. One part we all agree, and all the panelists mentioned about the benefit of rail, right? About being a green and sustainable transportation. The other one is the development engine side. I feel like we haven't really talked about a lot. When a developing nation borrows money and putting this infrastructure, one of the benefits for that country is creating jobs. My question is maybe for IMF or World Bank, I often see that those developing nations get the fund and hire a foreign company, and that company brings their manpower in the sake of efficiency, that project being forced and finished, and there is no knowledge transfer or workforce development, creating opportunity for a local workforce, or even thinking about long-term maintenance, either operating it or parts and supply manufacturing. So I know the World Bank has like the 30% requirement for a local employment. I don't know how much strictly be enforced. I feel like 30% is still small. So what are the opportunities? Maybe some of the other cities can be, nations also can share, creating that full value for that nation, borrow the money, but to create job opportunity, long-term maintenance. Often, once this infrastructure being built, they are relying on to the foreign company to provide parts. They are not functioning. They have to train again, hire them to really run the system. So I feel like I'm missing an opportunity. So I'm curious to hear maybe other nations also have an example, but there is a missing opportunity really to maximizing that investment that desperately that nation needs.
Very good. I don't know that the question mirrors the example or your experience in Brazil or in India. So I don't know if you want to answer it, Edgar, on that. How do we create jobs out of investment projects? Yep.
Yeah, I don't have an answer for that. If I did, I'll probably publishing a book or something. But what we're experiencing in Brazil is a discussion that we always have regarding industrial policies versus the sustainability and the efficiency of infrastructure. So we have Brazil is a pretty closed country, but we have a big internal market, so we're able to attract international companies to go there. And what happens is, from the moment we have a pipeline of projects, especially we're talking about railways, most companies and industry they set up an industry in Brazil because they know that they're going to be able to provide, for example, trains for a long time, and that makes a little bit of sense. And also because Brazil is pretty closed. So if you're going to import those trains, it's going to be quite expensive, even though some industries are competitive enough. So even though we have all the tariffs that are coming from abroad, they're still cheaper than the ones that we build in Brazil. But that's, I don't know if that's the correct answer in a sense, because the projects get more expensive. So we could have more projects or better projects if we didn't have those barriers. But then we wouldn't have the jobs. So in the end, what creates more jobs? Having the factories there, building the trains, or being able to build more railways because I would be able to build them cheaper? That's a question that I don't have the answer, but that's sort of the trade-off that we believe from our perspective there in Brazil that we're living at the moment.
Very good. I don't know if anyone else wants to answer that question. Oh, Pierre, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the question. And I have a pretty good idea what the motivation behind that question is in relation to SGR project in Ethiopia, which I don't know very well, but I've heard a lot about. First and foremost, I think for us as financier, making sure that local content is high is not a 30% objective. It's an appropriation and it's a natural defense mechanism against political risk, okay? Because when it's totally outsourced to foreign entities, it becomes a flashpoint for every political cycle as, you know, the wrong thing. So as a financier, we cannot obligate our private sector who knows better than we do. They're the expert. We're not supposed to be the expert, okay, how to run a train. But we certainly go a long way in trying to encourage them to do as much as they can in terms of local sourcing and local involvement. That goes without saying. Now, taking an example of just construction, might it be SGR in Ethiopia? Might it be a recent railway in country that are least developed, like Guinea? You will have a foreign contractor coming to rebuild entirely a rail line. Even in those cases, the amount of foreign workers being brought in was less than 10%. 90% was local content, simply because it made sense, you know, from the standpoint of interfacing with the local community, all those things. Those are flashpoints that we looked at, and it's very important to have local workers with us. Now, when it comes to the equipment itself, you know, scales is everything. You cannot expect a private sector operator to set up a factory for locomotive maintenance if your entire fleet is 50 locomotives. It just doesn't make sense. What we're trying to advocate as financiers, whatever you bring in, make sure it's open architecture, so you're not tied to a single supplier going forward, or the technology you're bringing is ubiquitous and can be found in other equipment suppliers. And I think that's maybe where a sensitive spot may actually hit in the case of Ethiopia and other places, is that there seem to be an overly tie-up for the very long term with a single type of suppliers, and then moving away from it then has a cascading effects, because if you take different type of locomotives or different type of traffic control systems, then you have to redo everything at once. And it's not like I'm just changing one thing, it's you have to change the entire network. So those are the things that need to be thought of, but they need to be thought of by the regulators, by the government who actually buys the system. Okay, they need to set up actually regulation so that is being enforced. You cannot blame the private sector for trying to find, you know, the cheapest alternative that delivers on what is being demanded of. So responsibility has to to be shared there. Finger pointing goes both ways. And I think an honest discussion around that goes a long way in alleviating some of the tension that you will see in terms of local content versus foreign content. But there is no silver bullet to that at the end of the day. But what you say for us as financier, the more local content we have, the happier we get, because it's the best political risk insurance we can get out of a private sector operator.
Yeah, so of course I need the volume and scale to be able to create a local manufacturing. I wanted to also say that we're having an internal debate in the bank, very, very lively and thriving one about jobs and how do you create jobs. It's not just about direct jobs, or direct jobs don't last that long, right? So the manufacturing phase is short. What is the impact of the investment on local jobs and local population? Do the, on passenger rail, they get to jobs much faster. The people would not take jobs unless they can travel to their job, to the office much faster. And there's huge implications indirectly on quality of jobs, quantity of jobs. And so the idea is, how do we design projects that have a better impact of the local economy, not just during the construction, but also during the operation, right? These projects last for decades, right? So how do we bring value to that, and the reduction in costs and logistics, and which reduces product costs and so on and so forth. So there's huge implications that we're trying to figure out how do we capture that and monitor it so that we can attribute it and essentially report on it, and that it's a credible means to do it. I think we ran out of time. I don't know if anyone wants to answer the question from our colleague about should we what does it take to get the railway sector completely off the books of the public sector? Is this realistic? Is it only a dream for a few countries? And I don't know who wants to take that question. Go ahead, Lucy. Yeah.
Well, one thing is, I think the reason aviation can make a profit is because it does receive subsidy in terms of tax break. And well, this is obviously a bigger discussion, but in terms of fossil fuel subsidies and things like that we don't have a level playing ground in many ways. And so, what I would say is that most of the time, rail is paying its way in terms of all its external costs in the majority. But it's quite rare that rail or any public transport project makes money or even breaks even. It's very, very rare. So it's because the majority of the profit is for the rest of the economy, for the rest of society is taking that benefit. And so we've got to recognize that's the case. It's only, say, Morocco, some high-speed city pairs are really popular and really profitable, and high speed can be quite more profitable than others if it's in the right project, and you've got really low operating costs, which can be the super big factor in that as well, as I understand.
Thank you for tackling that. Anyone else have any burning response to that? I see. Yeah. Shimona, go ahead.
My answer will be, it depends on the countries and at what development curve they are. In fact, at some point of time, it has to be the investment. And once you reach a level, maybe you can afford to transfer that cost to the public. If you come to that level, well, good. But then to reach that, perhaps you need some investment. Thank you.
Very good. With that, let's thank the panelists for very interesting and great diverse views. Yep. Thank you so much for everyone.